Hey everybody, before we get into this week's episode, just want to say a huge thank you to everybody who's listened to and watched our episodes so far. If we can ask a big favour of you, if you are watching us on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. If you are listening to us on any other podcast platforms, please hit that follow and give us a rating. It'll help us a huge amount and reach more and more people. Thanks again everybody. Welcome to Over the Falls podcast, episode number 29. This week, we sat down with Nick Helm, who is a comedian, writer, actor, and rock musician. He is self-aware of his own mental health and is open and honest about it, which is what this podcast is all about. We had a really good chat, had a laugh, and learned a lot. We hope you enjoy. Here we go. Nick Helm, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Welcome.
Can we start with your work as a comedian?
Yeah.
And where did all that start?
Please do.
Where did it all start?
How did I start as a comedian?
Yeah, I mean, was there a certain point where you realised, like, actually, I'm quite funny here, so I can actually do something about this?
No, no, and I know that there are people out there that think, oh, fucking hell, I'm funny, but not me. But maybe you can hope. Yeah. You can hope that maybe they think that I'm funny, but there are people that have so much self-belief that they think, oh yeah, I'd do that. But I think I don't have any other options. I think this is it now. It's like, right, okay. But how did I start? I started because I did drama at school. I was like one of the arty guys. So I did like drama, art, English literature, all that stuff. Never good at sport, none of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And I really... I moved from London to St Albans when I was quite young, like 7 or 8. But it was just kind of like that point where I started the end of a school cycle, so just at the end of kind of like infant school or something like that. And then I never really sort of like made any friends in St Albans. And then I made sort of like some in secondary school, but I really came into my own when I hit like year 11, and I started doing school plays. And then I was in I formed a couple of bands, and nice. And then I wrote songs and poems and stuff like that, and then you'd have to like rope your friends into doing stuff, and then I kind of got like the lead in school plays and things like that, and I started writing stuff, and then when we got to like A levels, I mean this is quite long winded, but it's sort of there was never a point when I thought. I'm going to be a stand-up comedian, right. Or I want to be a stand-up comedian. Because all the way through my childhood, I was, surrounded by comedy. I remember very specifically, like almost my first experience of stand-up comedy was, my dad would read to me in bed, and he would fall asleep, and I would crawl over him. And I'd go downstairs and I'd watch Jasper Cout with my mum.
Whoa!
And that was like that must have been like 1984 or 1985. Yeah. And it looked like the news because it was a guy that was just talking to the camera, but there was like an audience that were all laughing. And I was just like, well, it looked boring, but I was just like, but this is actually. It's obviously really fun, and I don't know what that is. Wow. And we grew up with all that sort of comedy, like French and Saunders and
Harry Enfield.
Yeah, Harry Enfield a bit, but really I started loving that when like Harry Enfield was huge at our school, but I don't think I ever kind of like religiously watched that. We used to watch like Roseanne and Cheers on a Friday night on Channel 4, yeah. And then when we got a bit older, it was like Smell of Reeves and Mortimer. Bottom, absolutely. Because I was too young. I was too young for the young ones. The young ones was terrifying.
Yeah. So
how old are you? Like
40. We're all 40.
Similar age.
Yeah. Right, I'm 42. Yeah.
So I remember that I had to sneak to watch Bottom or the young ones, but my dad was more lenient with the young ones, I think.
Oh, really?
Which was I'm quite surprised at knowing now what I know now, sort of thing.
Because when Vivian stuck his head out the train and got his head I know, right? But that fucked me up. Like I had nightmares about it. I actually just did a talking head thing they're doing a Bottom documentary. And I did that yesterday or the day before, where you just sit down and talk about what your memories of Bottom were. And I just like growing up in London in the 80s. it was like you were bombarded by horrific stuff like all the time. There was like everyone thought there was going to be a nuclear war, and there were all the schools were on strike, and then it was the height of the AIDS epidemic, and Freddy Krueger was on the underground. You know, every time you go in the underground, there was all these posters for like Night on Elm Street 3, Night on Elm Street 4, and like everywhere you looked, it was just like, oh my god! Like you'd go down and it would just be bombarded. They didn't give a shit if you could if you were 6. Do you know what I mean? And you would just be exposed to all of this horrific stuff all the time. Everyone was like dying, or like the threat of nuclear war was like hanging over you, and there was like, it was just terrifying. It was all terrifying. And then you'd go home, and then Vivian would get his head knocked off, and like it was just, everything was just an absolute. The 80s. I mean, it's all, everyone's got like rose tinted glasses a little bit, but like. It was just an absolute fuck fest. It was horrific. Yeah. So when I was like 10 or 11, and then Bottom came out, it was exactly the right age, you know.
Yeah.
Because it was slapstick, but it was really grimy and. It felt rude.
I love it.
I was saying that on the show. It's just like, who was it even made for? Do you know what I mean? Because it was just like, it was so childish that it can't be for adults.
Yeah,
but it's absolutely no way it's for kids, right?
No. Yeah, you're right. Maybe it was aimed for teenagers. Rick Mail.
It was Rick Mail.
Yeah.
I think it was made specifically for Rick Mail and Adrian Edmondson.
Oh,
and like, but yeah, it was really. But then also because you know, I was thinking about that as well. I was just thinking that, you know, Absolutely Fabulous is almost like the female version of Bottom. You know, it's kind of I never sort of like associated them together like that. Yeah. But you know, Adrian Edmondson and Jennifer Saunders are obviously a couple, and he does the theme tune for that. But there's obviously like connections.
Yeah.
But I never thought about it like that. Anyway, so I grew up with all of this comedy, and like Jack Dee was my favourite comedian, and me and my sister used to watch Fist of Fun and Mary Whitehouse Experience and Joe Brand and Eddie Izzard and Lee Evans, and like it was just like, but at no point did I look at them and go, oh, I'll do that. Do you know what I mean?
Wow.
And I was in loads of bands, and I was in school plays and stuff like that. And then at the end of my A levels, I wrote like an individual skill. Everyone had to do an individual skill, and I got like I was. This is a bit sad, like talking about it, I suppose, because I'm still hanging on to it. But I was the first student to ever get 100%.
Yes.
And I was like, it's sad, right? It's sad that I really care about it, but it is quite. It was really good. It was like this monologue, and I got 100% because I sort of like designed the set and I directed. I didn't get done for. They didn't mark me for acting. I think I got direction, writing, and set design maybe. But you have to do like everything. You have to make a 10-minute play. And at the end of it, my teacher said, "You should take that up to Edinburgh." In the midst of all that, in 1997, my drama teacher, took us up to the Edinburgh Festival, and we did a school play. We did Romeo and Juliet.
Wow.
And we did it for maybe a week or 2 weeks, and we all had to flyer every day, and you know, do the show and put the set up and get all the set out and look after our costumes, and you know, we had to do everything that you had to do to put a show on. And then but then we were on at midday, and so at like 2:00 it was carnage.
Yeah.
We were like a bunch of fucking 16-year-olds that were let loose in Edinburgh, and we just went to see like stand-up comedy all night. And I used to go and see stuff at the Tron and at the Pleasance, and went to see Al Murray, and Al Murray got me out of the audience and got me up on stage. And that was like, because I do a lot of audience stuff, and that was a big thing. That was like, I like, people say, oh, don't pick on me, you know, when it comes to like audience stuff. I always used to like, and I saw Al Murray about 3 or 4 years in a row, and for some reason he always picked on me, and it was just that, and I loved it. Do you know what I mean?
There's that kid again. I'm going to grab him.
How would he remember me? Do you know what I mean? It's just like, but like, I must have just been sort of like, do you know what? I must have really been, because when I choose people out of the audience, I always pick the person that's enjoying it the most. And I pretend that they hate it.
Or the worst, I guess, right?
No.
So someone's like,
Don't pick on them.
No.
Never pick on them.
Why would you?
No, fair enough. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I'm not picking on anyone to sort of like ruin their night. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The whole point is that you're like, really
going.
You're asking them to join in. And so if you pick on someone that's just absolutely hating it, then it's like, you're going to fuck this up, aren't you? You're going to fuck it up for everyone. But no one can see their face, so you just pretend like someone's hating it, and then everyone goes, oh, God, they're not enjoying it, are they? And then you give them a go, and they're like the person that's enjoying it the most. So maybe I was enjoying it the most. But I wrote, they said, take your show up to Edinburgh, and I'd already done like a couple of Edinburghs with my school and stuff. And then I was like, how do you take 10 minutes up to Edinburgh? So I wrote another 5-10 minute plays.
Wow.
And I put it together as an hour with my mate Ed, who is the big brother of Rich, who I used to live with, who was friends with Enter Shikari.
Gotcha.
Right. And so we're all connected, right? We're all connected. But
because Edinburgh Fringe Festival is like, it's really good for exposure for like new acts and everything, isn't it? Is that's the place to be noticed? Is that the?
Well, I don't know. It's changed a lot. It's changed a lot since I started. I mean, it took years. So my first show was 2001, and then I did that with 3 other people, and then I did another show in 2002. Didn't do anything in 2003.
Okay.
2004, I did another show. Didn't do anything in 2005. And then 2006 onwards, I haven't had a year off. So I've done almost, except for, maybe 2018. So 2003, 2005 and 2018, I didn't do. But I've done every year since 1997.
Wow. That's amazing.
And so what you end up doing is you end up writing plays and trying to convince people that let's do these. But nobody cares as much as you care.
Yeah.
And so like, it was like being in a band. It's just like, I've written all these songs. Now I've got to
show them,
force everyone to do what I think is best, you know. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But like, well, it's like this podcast. It's like you're all here and you're pulling in the same direction, right? And you're all making it happen, you know. Whereas, and so that's great. But imagine if these two cunts were working against you.
Tell me about it, mate.
Every single hour
Tell me
of
about
the day. I mean,
it's a fucking nightmare, mate.
Do you know what I mean?
I'll say this until I'm blue in the face. We turn up.
This is true.
To Dave's house.
Yeah.
With some questions.
Yeah.
And talk. Then we leave, and Dave does all the editing. He does absolutely everything.
Yeah. So you're the drummer and you're the bass player.
Exactly. I keep forgetting my sticks. And,
Dave's lead guitar and lead singer. And then he's editing.
And the manager and the PR and everything. And the tour bus.
It's his fault no matter what. Right. Yeah. So it's like that, and then they got to a point. I'd started writing a play when I was like at school, and then the way I work is I book it in. Like I go, right, I'm doing this in August, then I have to write it. And I took the play up. The play was fine. It got a printing error, and because it was paper back then, it was actual newspapers. The internet was new. And this is 2006, and I'd spent like 7 years writing this play, and the review came out, and it got 1 star in the Scotsman, and it was just like, oh yeah. But the review was so mediocre. It was sort of like it didn't say anything horrible, but it didn't say anything good. It was just sort of like, it was such an average review. I was like, well, if you're going to get a 1 star, you really want it to be like delicious. Do you know what I mean? And it was like, this was just like, this was weak, right? Like, I give this review 1 star. Do you know what I mean? And then they phoned up the theatre, and they said, there was a printing error, and it should have been a 2-star review. And when you went online, it was just like, sure enough, it's 2-star. But we sold out because we got a 1-star review, and everyone came to see this horrible show.
Wow. That's really interesting.
And we came out, and it was the best show we'd ever had, because everyone overcompensated. When we came out, everyone was like booing and tatting us, and then by the end of it, we won them over. And it's just like, if we'd have got like a 5-star review or a 4-star review, people would have turned up and gone, where's this good show? But when you get like a 2-star review and it's better than 2 stars, maybe it's even 2.5 or a 3-star review, right? Maybe it's a 3-star show. Then people are just like, well, it's much better than 2 stars. Or much better than 1 star. Do you know what I mean? It was like, anyway, so I was just like, if you can spend 7 years writing something that can accidentally get 1 star but actually deliberately get 2 stars, then maybe that's a waste of 7 years. And I did stand-up comedy, that was August in 2006, and I did my first stand-up gig in September 2006.
What was that like, first gig?
Amazing. And like it was at Crouch End downstairs at the King's Head, and I'd done sort of like a 1-day comedy course earlier on in the year, but basically I had no money, and I was working at like a business link in Hatfield maybe, and I scratched together all my money, and I had like 200 quid, and I was doing a job in St Albans or Hatfield where I was doing it was like 9 to 5:30 every day, and I was temping, and at the end of the week I would make £205, and it was like, well, I'm going to drink that.
Yep.
I'm so depressed about this awful job.
Oh,
it's taking up every hour of the day. You know, I'm going to drink all that, and then so you didn't have any money. So I scraped together like some savings and stuff, and it felt really frivolous to sort of like spend 200 quid on a comedy thing, because it was just like a potential hobby at that point.
Right.
But at the end of it, you know, they can't teach you loads, but they can give you kind of like, you know, the confidence to hold a microphone,
Sure.
you know, and to say like, oh, tell us a story that you wouldn't tell your mum, you know, and so that's what we spent a day doing. There were other courses that were like £1,000 or £500 that went on for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Right.
But this was just the cheapest thing I find, all done in one day. And at the end of it, I got a phone number for King's Head at Crouch End. Did the gig, and then and I was writing stuff not just on the way to the gig, but while I was on stage. And to write a play where you've written it, and once you've written it, you've learnt it, and you're rehearsing it, and then you're rewriting bits. But then once you're performing it, that's it, it's locked.
Gotcha.
And then to do something that was like, oh, that didn't quite work today, so I'm going to say it differently tomorrow, and to just have like that spontaneity, and not have to convince 3 other people that what you're doing is. It was literally just like, I'll try this just as a break from trying to write plays.
So have you got a format for writing like solo work, or have you got
No.
Do you stick to like you don't stick to like sort of a plan or a format?
No, there's no real format, like, and it all comes really differently.
And you mentioned about the Fringe. You mentioned Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
Did you? Sorry, I'm a bit.
I didn't write that one. That was William Shakespeare.
I know that.
That
But that's what I mean. Did you like alter it to be funny or
no?
Like,
I mean, well, it was edited. Our drama teacher, Miss Howes, Miss Wallace now, Mrs. Wallace. Oh, that feels weird. Miss.
They're all Miss. Yeah.
Louise Wallace. Oh, she directed a play this year that I went to go and see in Welwyn Garden City, and it was incredible. Like she's just this really incredible like theatre director, and she would have she edited it, cut it down, and then added a bunch of songs, and it was just like, all right, so cut some Shakespeare out to make room for some of your songs. Yeah, sure. But it was really great. Like just as an experience, we were really lucky. We weren't like a super rich school. We were really lucky to have that experience, and it's really funny. Like I bumped into one of the other students who didn't do drama. Like I didn't do PE. I didn't have like that, and I was shit at PE, like terrible at sport, and I never had sort of like that that encouragement of being good at something that was like respected by other people, and drama was like. Oh, I was all right at it, you know. And she gave us this amazing opportunity that I kind of changed my whole life.
Yeah.
Like I did that first Edinburgh in 1997. I was like, oh, I could do this forever. And I pretty much have.
Nice.
Whereas I bumped into a student who we did art together, but he didn't do drama. And this was in 2019, so this was on my Phoenix from the Flames tour. He came to see me in Edinburgh, and I saw him in the audience. I was halfway through a song, and I did the "Do you fancy a pint, mine?" while I was singing, and then we went for a drink afterwards. And he said to me, and I'd never thought about it, but he said how lucky that we were for having that experience. Like he was like one of the guys that used to smoke weed in the woods, like at lunchtime.
Yeah,
and he was just like, you had that opportunity that your teacher gave you, and he said, and it really sort of like change things for you. And he said that he never had that. He never had that teacher, or he never had that person that kind of gave him that encouragement or that opportunity. So he never really knew what he kind of wanted to do with his life. But me, as a sort of, I guess I must have been 16, to have like that moment where you go, oh, it's something like this. And when I got up on stage in 2006 and I did my first gig, I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. Everything. It was like that missing piece to the puzzle where you're kind of like, I don't know what I want to do, and I would imagine most people never have that moment where it's sort of like all clicks and people just really have to sort of like work on finding it, or they, accidentally fall into something, or the plan A doesn't work and now they're on plan D. Do you know what I mean? But it's like...
it's really influential teacher then.
Yeah, amazing. But but also like I thought I was going to write plays, and then it sort of like evolved. And then it was like what I found was I was trying to find something that felt fulfilling, and I thought it was theatre. And then when I did stand up, I realised that I have a poster designer. But basically, I know what I want, and I tell him what I want. So it's like you get design work out of it. I always wear costumes. I always try and make my shows as theatrical as possible with lighting and with kind of like pyrotechnics. And do you know what I mean? I'm always trying to kind of like go, how do you make it more theatrical? And I always try and put kind of like themes in my shows, and like there's like a what do you call it, like an emotional journey, and it's all really theatrical. Even me just coming out and being mean to people and calling everyone cunts. It's like,
I was watching one of you last night, the way you said like, do you like jokes? Do you like jokes? Do you like jokes? Like,
it's like you go like, fucking hell, what's this? Do you know what I mean? But it's like but I mean.
It's very intense.
That's amazing.
It is intense, right? It is intense. But like, why should everything be nice? I was just thinking. I was listening to the radio, and they were talking about this film that they just seen. They said, "Oh, it's very heartwarming." And like, heartwarming is a sign of good. Do you know what I mean? And it's just like, well, things can be heartwarming. That is an option, right? But what I found when I first started doing stand-up comedy is when you're like the 11th act out of 15 acts on a Thursday night and it's raining, and you've borrowed 20 quid off your dad to do a gig, and then you're going to get paid 20 quid and you have to give it right back. Do you know what I mean? It's like you've got to make it worthwhile if you're taking up that much time, and you're like. So you go out there, and everyone in 2006, I did my first gig in 2006 and my second gig in 2007, but everyone around that time wanted to be Stuart Lee. And so you've got 15 low energy acts all in a row, all doing their Stuart, and none of them are Stuart Lee. So it's like, yeah. And then it was like...
You come along.
I was like, all right, some muggins here to like bring the energy into the room. And that's what I'd do. I'd go on and go, ah! And everyone would be like, well, and then at least wake up. And I would notice that, it'd be a really tough night. And the guy or girl that was on after me would have an absolute blinder. And I'd be like, I did that. I did that. I woke him up, and then you reap the benefits. But I think it's funny as well to just come out and, there's a lot of... I don't know. I just try not to use comedy as a way of making friends. I don't think you don't. I don't care if people like me.
Mm-hmm. Do you get a lot of hecklers?
No, not really. But I've never, like, in all my years of being in comedy clubs, I've never experienced loads and loads of heckling with me or with anyone else. When it does happen, they're just drunk.
Yeah.
And it's always boring. And it's always just like, sometimes if you're doing kind of like, I like audience participation. I was going to say, I've got a work in progress gig in a bit. Sometimes if you're doing work in progress and you start a conversation, it might take you down an avenue that you didn't think you'd go to, and then you'd be like, oh wow, maybe that'll be a bit of material. And then, I always find, especially when you're doing work in progress, that I'd have any opportunity to avoid doing material. Just so that I can kind of like, I've got that in my back pocket. But if I can do something spontaneous, then I'd rather do that.
Have you ever been like
really anxious about going on stage and sort of
Always,
thought,
yeah.
Always. So how do you sort of switch your mentality to go, come on, we've got to get on to do this?
I don't know where it came from, because I was probably nervous when I did acting. But and the reason I started writing was because I was absolutely dog shit at auditions, like terrible. So I started writing for myself, and then...
Is that because of the nerves you were bad, or another reason in the auditions?
Well, do you know what? I mean, it's looking back at stuff, I have real difficulty concentrating, have real difficulty... I've just lost my thread of thought even just saying that. I've got real difficulty sort of like sitting down and focusing on the job at hand, and like line learning is really difficult for me.
Okay.
And you know, I suffered from or been dealing with depression for like most of my life, and you know, you kind of like lump everything in one thing. You just go, well, that's depression, and then on top of the depression, I've got really shit memory and I'm terrible at all this other stuff. And on top of that, you know, eating disorders or whatever, you know, and so you kind of like go, well, these are all separate things. And then when everyone was kind of like getting diagnosed with ADHD, because we'd just spent 2 years on our phones and everyone's attention was like shot to fuck. And so everyone, like, especially in comedy, but you know, started getting diagnosed with ADHD, and then all of the adverts on my phone were kind of targeting me, kind of like, you've got, as soon as you start Googling it, then they go, right, okay,
here we go.
The algorithms are after you.
Now we're gonna tell him that he's got ADHD. And every time I've looked up ADHD, it kind of like, it does sort of, and also just by standing on stage, I'd be talking about depression, and people would come up to me afterwards and they'd say, that's ADHD, and you'd be like, okay, sure. And so, you know, I've been going to therapy, and I've been going to the doctors, and I've been getting antidepressants and stuff like that. And no one is saying, oh, it's ADHD. So you kind of have to do your own detective work to a certain point, or go to Harley Street with like, you know, £600 and say, can you tell me I've got ADHD? And it's just kind of like, well, what is it? So I'm sort of like in the process of kind of working out what it is, because ADHD does sort of like, is like an umbrella thing that covers a lot of what I've experienced, but I always feel like there's a 50% kind of, I agree with like half of it and then not the other half. So I feel like I'm kind of like on the verge of working out what I think is wrong with me.
Like what though? Like examples you're saying about with ADHD?
Yeah, I don't think I do have ADHD.
You don't think it is? No.
I don't think, I think I have a lot of similar things.
Okay.
I'm looking, I mean, I don't know, because it's all really fresh, and it's only been in the last 3 weeks that I've been really looking, that I've kind of, it's like detective work. So you kind of like go down like a road, and then you're like, well, it's not that, and you get to a dead end, to continue the metaphor, and then you have to like start again and go, well, maybe it's somewhere over here. So I'm looking at complex PTSD at the moment, which sort of takes everything that everything that I feel like I've been experiencing. It takes pretty much everything and says, oh, it's all attributed to that, which makes it a lot easier to kind of get your head around, rather than thinking there's 15 individual things that are wrong with me. You know, oh, it's one thing, and if I can learn to handle that, I'll be able to learn to handle everything else. But that's all very new, and I'm not going on my, you know, world press tour going on about CPTSD. I've literally I've never heard of it, and I think they only kind of like worked out what it was in the 90s, and so I'm kind of like I'm looking into that at the moment, which I find it fascinating. But in terms of kind of what was the initial question about nerves and getting on stage? Yeah, really. I think it was that my show, my club set was so. That's the one I did on like Russell Howard's Good News. That was the thing that sort of got me well known. Because that was like they didn't want me on that show. They came to see me in Edinburgh in 2010. That was sort of like my big year. I've been doing it. Also, by 2010, I wrote my first show in 2001, and by 2010, although I'd only been doing stand-up for about 4 years, I'd sort of given up on my dreams. And 2010 was like, I'll do one more because I'm in a paid venue this year. I've done the Free Fringe. I was in a paid venue. I'll do one more this year, and then I'll take a year off. And that was the year that Daniel Kitson and Jimmy Carr and Cunt and the gang and all my heroes. That was the year that they all get, and one of my drama teachers. That was the year they all came to see me. And then they put me on Russell Howard's Good News, and I was a Joker card, which was like they record one extra.
Right.
And if one of the ones that they really want doesn't work out, then they'll use you.
Really?
So it wasn't anything to do with Russell Howard sort of maybe selecting you and say, please, can you come on the show? It was more like producers and then...
Yeah, Russell Howard didn't do that.
Okay.
I don't understand how it all works. Yeah.
It's not quite like that. No, all the producers come and see you.
Okay.
And you don't know anything about it, and they will have conversations. I didn't know anything about it at all. I'd done years and years of Edinburgh where you have like 4 people in the audience. And then in 2009, I'd written a show called Bad Things Happen in Trees where I didn't even have flyers. And then at some point, I was there for 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks. And at some point, during like the second week, all of a sudden we were standing room only, and it was just like, well, what's this, Joe? And then it was like, this must be what word of mouth is, because no one's coming up to me telling me, oh, you should go and see your show. It's brilliant. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. You're just doing your show, and then you're leaving, and then you're kind of having whatever your day is, and then you turn up the next day and there's more people. So that was like, oh my God. And then when we got like back then there was the £5 Fringe, and I did that in 2010 at the Tron, where I'd seen kind of stand-up comedy. Jason John Whitehead I'd seen there, and I was always like, I want to do comedy at the Tron, and that's where I did my first paid venue. And then that took off, and then they put me on Russell Howard's Good News, and and I wasn't meant to do that. They were going to record me as sort of, I think they thought I was going to hit someone. Do you know what I mean? I think they just thought that he's a wild man.
He's a wild card.
We can't do anything about it. There'll be no way of controlling him. Once you say his name, he'll be straight out there tearing people apart. And it was like, I just don't know what they thought. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And it was like, well, it's all an act. It's an act. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I try and write, I'm not like an observational comedian really, but what I try and be is kind of like, I try and be like an emotional comedian where I'm sort of like exploring emotions. And I just think they thought I was crazy. and then it ended up going well. And then,
good.
And why did I talk about that? How did that?
Still talking about nerves.
Let me finish the nerves thing. Let me finish the nerves thing. So I got really nervous, and so that set that I did on Russell Howard's, that was sort of like that involved coming out and doing like one-liners, and then a song, and then a poem, and then a story, and then a joke, and then another song, and then something else, and then I would just be like, what if I forget any of it?
I can't. I dread it. When I imagine it, I get terrified.
It was so stressful. It was so stressful because no matter how many times I'd done it, I was always at that point where I was sort of like, just like, what if I forget it? What if it goes wrong? Because that routine was just on rails, and if it came off, I didn't know how to get back to it. And
was it live? It wasn't live.
Is it Russell Howard?
Yeah, was it? Obviously, you had a live audience. Were they filming it live as well? As in, like, was it going out?
No.
No,
I think I did something like 20 minutes, and they cut it down to about 15. Okay. But what was interesting about that was that my set at that point was a little bit like, I wasn't quite sure what I was doing with it. And when they edited it, it gave me a much better idea of what I actually wanted it to be. I was just like, oh yeah, maybe something a little bit more like that. So then I sort of adapted what I did to be more like that. But it was really weird at the time as well, because it was a really good set. I was so happy with it, and it was like I could have lived off that for years. But as soon as I did it on TV, I regretted it, because it was like, because every time I did a gig after that, I felt like everyone had seen it and everyone knew what it was. And even though the percentage of people that were watching BBC Three's Russell Howard Good News aren't the same people that are in the comedy clubs, but you still have that paranoia.
It's on YouTube as well, though, I suppose. Like people watching clips of it.
Yeah, it was really. I mean, it's just out there, and you're just kind of, you can't. My biggest kind of ally was like, the surprise element of surprise, where you watch 3 comedians in a row and they're all doing stand up.
Yeah.
And even to today, when you come and see me do an hour, I create my own world. It's my own sort of like atmosphere. That's it. But when you see me do like a 20 on a mixed bill, it's chaos because it's just like you've got three people telling jokes, and then you've got one person coming out here just creating. And I'm not like saying it's good. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying it's different, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, and it's chaos. And just before the pandemic, I was just like, I'm really not enjoying comedy and doing stand up anymore because I just have always just found it. If I've got a gig on a Thursday, then I'm nervous about it on Monday. But when you first start, you've got a gig in a month, and you're just like counting down the day, just thinking this is horrific. Oh my gosh! You just think, I hope I break my legs. Do you know what I mean?
Gosh, yeah. It's funny how you've kept pushing yourself though to make yourself do it as well, though. Or is it you had like support to do that?
As soon as you're on stage, it's different. I think the worry is not knowing how it's going to go. I think the worry is like it could be brilliant, right? Yeah. But it could also be awful. I've had some incredible gigs, but I've had some awful gigs.
That was one of my questions: was have you had a bad gig or a bad?
Of course, I've had a bad gig because I come out and I call people cunts, right? And it's just like, and you can't do that as like your first gig. Do you know what I mean?
Who's this guy?
There's a real, it's a real balancing act where, and it doesn't always work. But like you know, the thing is, you kind of like you don't mean it. How could you mean it?
Yeah,
you don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know that they're all cunts. You just assume.
And you were right.
But it's just sort of like it's the worst as a performer. The joke is really that it's the worst thing that you can do as a performer. Is to come out and be horrible to you. It's like creating such an uphill struggle for yourself. And sometimes I'll make them not clap me when I come on stage, and it will be like a real standing start, and by the end of it, you know, at the very least, it's an experience. Do you know what I mean? It's like performance art, but you know, and sometimes they go for it, and sometimes they don't go for it. But I think that is, I think for the people that love it, or the people that like it, they love it. Yeah. But the people that don't like it, it's sort of an experience that they've had. And maybe this is the wrong attitude to have because it's all about, you know, getting on Netflix and being a millionaire and I haven't I haven't done that, you know. And it's like, yeah, sure, but I feel like I've kind of like I've tried to do something in a way that I can kind of live with a bit.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know. I'm also not saying it's better or worse. I mean, my favourite comedians, although in the 90s those comedians were alternative comedians. Like
couldn't get away with that now, could they? A lot of the stuff.
Well, I don't. Well, no, that's the opposite of what I was going to say. Actually,
okay, sorry.
What I was going to say was that, you know, Jack D was like a real kind of like, oh right, so you got the mainstream comedians like Jim Davidson, and then you've got the alternative comedians that started off kind of like in the 80s with kind of Rick Mail and Adrian Edmondson and French and Saunders and Ben Elton, and you've got all of these, but then that evolved into Jack D and Joe Brandt, and they're the alternative comedians, but now they're like the respectable ones, you know. And so kind of like I don't have a problem with mainstream stuff. I love mainstream stuff, but also,
well, what do you consider like a sort of a mainstream sort of thing?
Well, Ramesh Ranganathan is kind of
yeah, because the contrast there is really obvious to see, isn't it? Like Ramesh's work to some of the older stuff, like it's like.
Yeah, but also he's not a million miles away from someone like Jack D.
No. Like
he's maybe like our generation's Jack D.
Yeah.
Jack D was the best comedian. I haven't seen him in a while, but like...
we'll tag him and maybe he'll see him.
I mean, I worked with him a couple of times.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if he thinks that I'm that great.
Is he the funniest person you've ever met? 'Cause one of my questions was, who's the funniest person you think you've met?
The funniest person I've ever met. The funniest person I've ever met.
Or seen, maybe. I don't know how to word it.
I don't know. I mean...
Or worked with. Or
yeah, it's tricky asking a comedian that question, isn't it?
Because we hate each other.
Well, you're in direct competition.
You all get on with each other then. You're like...
No, but it's like you have... Not like... I think we have friends. And there are people that you kind of like...
Bond with, I guess.
Yeah, get on with. Yeah. But it's different. Like you get to a certain point, like the best years were the first years when we were all like starting out together, and we were all having terrible gigs, and we were all learning off each other, and we were all helping each other, and kind of like, here's a joke for you, or you could maybe say this at the end of that, and that's not working, and we were all living in each other's pockets and staying on each other's floors and stuff like that. It was brilliant. There was no competition. As soon as somebody starts to get successful, then it's sort of like there's blood in the water, and then people sort of are like, what have they got that I haven't got? And I'm not saying that I'm above it, but I feel like it is it's just the worst thing you can have to be. It's the worst circumstances or conditions to put yourself under in order to be creative, because you're just looking at what other people have got and what they're doing, and comparing. When I do Edinburgh, I try and do the whole thing with blinkers. I don't read any reviews. I don't, and I read them after.
Yeah, sure.
And it's not like a bullshit thing. Oh, I don't read my reviews, but like I don't read my reviews, because what are you going to do? I'm not going to rewrite my show. I have enough faith in what I do, and I do enough previews, and I know what I am as a performer, that it's all within kind of like, a quality level, So I don't go up there to find out whether it's good or not. I go up there to sort of entertain people. Yeah. And then and the reviews are brilliant, because they promote your show, right? And you go out and you got a poster and it's got like 4 or 5 star reviews on it, and you go, that promotes your show for you. Yeah. But they're a tool to market your show so you can get an audience. But I've had a 5-star review from the Telegraph, and then you do a show and it's all Tories that are in the audience, and they hate you, and they go, where's this 5-star show? And you go, this is the 5-star show. It's just not your 5 stars. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so it's kind of like it just depends. Like. My show wasn't a Telegraph show that year, but the comedy reviewer for the Telegraph liked it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I tend to just avoid all of that bullshit, because the other thing is they tell you that your show isn't good enough or it's rubbish, and it's just kind of, what are you going to do? You're going to rewrite it every night. You have to go up there. You have to survive. You've got to live your life. It's an hour every day, and you just got to make that work as much as possible. And then afterwards, you read all the reviews and you revel in it. But I just think, I want to be happy for my friends. Yeah. And I want to do well. Yeah. And as soon as there's kind of like stuff that gets in the way of that, then it makes me feel like grubby and a bit shit about it. Yeah. And it is there in the industry. It's a it's like being an ice cream seller, right? And you're selling ice cream, and someone doesn't like the ice cream, and it's just like, well, fair enough. It's the farmer makes it, and I'm just selling it, right? Yeah. But with comedy, it's like, you are the ice cream. Yeah. And if they don't like your flavour, then it's personal. Yeah. Of course. And so we're all like trying to sell, we're all trying to sell ourselves, and it's and it is the most personal thing in the world, because it's your sense of humour. It's you. Yeah. People in all the. I was going through some. I'm having a sort out through my flat. I was going through some old kind of like newspaper clippings and stuff like that. Everyone mentioned my weight, and it's like. And it was like, I don't even talk about my weight. Do you know what I mean? And it's just sort of like a thing where it's just like, that's how we're going to describe you for this article. And it's just kind of like, it's just really interesting, but it's like incredibly personal, because you're putting yourself out there. Yeah. And so of course it's going to be competitive.
You brought up comparison there, and I think it's something we can all relate to in this room.
Is it the ice cream?
Not the ice cream. The social media aspect. Maybe you're going to ask about social media.
The competition world of, man. So like have you ever, because I've suffered with it, like comparing myself directly to people on the internet, looking in the mirror a bit, and like have you gone through things like that similarly to me or other men, and also with your actual comedic sort of work? The comparison you've just sort of talked about, that it hasn't hit you that hard, because you don't want to listen to it. But have you ever sort of been down in the dumps about like, my work might not be as funny as someone else's?
You cannot avoid it. If you're on social media, you can't avoid it, right? It doesn't matter. I don't think it matters. For a start, in terms of work, it doesn't really matter what you've achieved. Yeah. It's about what you're doing right now. Mm-hmm. And if you're happy, on holiday, then have a great holiday. And if you're happy working, then I hope that whatever you're working on is successful, you know. But I don't walk around thinking, oh, I was on a sitcom and I got a 5-star review. I did mention it. Got a 5-star review on the Telegraph. Never mention the 2-star. Right? That's for me to mention, all right? But do you know what I mean? I don't walk around feeling like, oh, I've achieved all this stuff and I've done this, this, and this. I walk around thinking, oh, how am I going to, like a large part of my identity and who I am is what I do. And I enjoy being an alternative comedian. And like I'm an alternative to, I feel like I'm an alternative to alternative comedy. Do you know what I mean? Whereas, you know, I enjoy that, and I enjoy coming out on stage and being completely different from all the other acts. I've tried really hard, or maybe not tried really hard, but like I've tried instinctively almost to just do something that isn't the same as what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
It was really weird because when I started out, me and Sean Walsh started out together, and Sean, when the moment he started, was just like, you know, we were doing like the main room in a pub at like 7 o'clock in the evening on a Wednesday on the South Bank, and there's 3 people in, and you're standing in front of a pool table with the football on behind you, and it's just like the worst conditions. Do you know what I mean? And he was always good. He was just always ready for. Do you know what I mean? Like from the moment, I think he was about 22 and I was 26 or 27.
Right.
So, but we started out about the same time, and he was just sort of like always just. As soon as he started, everyone was like, oh. And rather than be like competitive, it was like reassuring, because it meant like, oh, we're in the right place, because that's as close to TV comedy as
sure.
You can get. Like, it wasn't like everyone was dog shit, and it was just like, what the fuck are we all doing? Like, he was really good. And then I was good in a different way. And I just remember one Christmas he said, I don't think it's going to be your year yet. And I was just like, well, why though? Why? Because we've done gigs together where he gets laughs and I get laughs. We get the same laughs. Yeah. And for me, I was like, I didn't realise I was alternative until, you know, much later, where then I was just like, oh, what I do is so bonkers compared to what everyone else does.
Yeah.
That it's just like, oh, right. So in my work, I try not to be competitive, because I try and feel like, well, you can't compete with me, not like in an arrogant way, but just like I'm just doing something that's so uniquely me, and I think that's what everyone should be doing. But I'm not really interested in what everyone else is doing.
Sure.
I'm happy to, you know, I want to watch comedy, I want to see comedians. I find it really exciting to go and watch my friends do hours, or to find like a new comedian and watch them do shows. I really love being in small, hot, sweaty rooms and watching comedy. You know, it's brilliant, right? But I don't want to, you know, I want to keep what I do me, and I want everyone else to be, you know, doing what they're doing. So I don't really.
You can make a clear separation. So you mentioned that like really hot, sweaty room. You're watching like some maybe a friend of yours doing their stand-up performance. You're just there for that moment. You're enjoying their comedic presence and what they're doing, and you never go, oh, I could use a bit of that in whatever. Never do that.
Never use a bit of that. If it's someone that's really like a really good friend, and you've got that relationship, you can watch it and you can go, what if you said this after that bit, and you maybe chip in a little bit, but only if you've got that relationship with them. But you'd never think that, but you also are human. So when you're watching other acts, you think, fuck me, that's good, and you can also think, like, oh, I wish I'd thought of that. But if you're always thinking about that, you can't be happy. I don't think. Exactly. I think, and when with social media, it's sort of like I'll find myself, I'll have been on my phone, and then like I'll be like sad, and I'll be like, why am I sad? And then it'll be like, well, what have you just done, Nick? You've just been on Instagram and you've just been scrolling through other things.
Literally.
And you're just there, like going, right, we're there on holiday, and they've had a nice dinner, and they're living their dreams, and what am I doing? I'm in bed, I've eaten a packet of biscuits, I'm covered in crumbs, and I'm scrolling through Instagram, and now I feel sad, and it's just like.
But we've talked about this loads, haven't we? It's like it's a snapshot of someone's life on
sugar-coated snapshot.
Totally sugar-coated.
It is, and you don't know where they're coming from with it all. You know, it might be that they've had a bad day and they're trying to cheer themselves up. It might be that there's a horrible fucking narcissist that's just trying to make everyone around them feel terrible. Right? You don't know what anyone's motivations are.
No.
I just stay in my fucking lane. On Twitter, I don't go outside of my comment section.
Oh yeah, it's a little place that
I'm
is
not
Twitter,
doing
isn't
it.
it?
And also, I'm just like, I'm not good enough at Twitter. Like, it'll be like, I'll forget that I've got Twitter unless I've got to promote something, right? And then it'd be like, hey, you've got a show coming up. You've got to promote your show. So I go on Twitter and I promote my show. And then I have like 3 likes. And then you're just like, right, okay. I don't know how to do Twitter.
Yeah, what do I do now?
What do I do? And then you're like checking. You're going like, okay, well, I've got 4 likes, brilliant. And then it's just like, well, isn't that either Twitter's your thing and you're really great at it? I just don't want to be on it. I've had. Well, when I did Russell Howard, that would be 2010 when Twitter was relatively new.
Yeah,
and the producer phoned me up and they said, oh, don't. You might want to go on Twitter, actually, because people are really enjoying it. There are 1 or 2 comments that you just can ignore, but overall, it's really positive. And then you look at it because you've been told to, and, all the negative comments are the things that really stand out. And I think that it's funny, isn't it? Because there's like a glass ceiling on how nice you can be to someone, or there's a ceiling to it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you go, oh, you were brilliant. And you go, oh, thank you. Oh, you were so good. You go, thank you. You were amazing. Thank you. You were brilliant. I've had that, do you know what I mean? You've said that already. I've heard someone else said that. Oh, but there's no limit to how horrible people can be.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's just sort of like, for me, Twitter was never worth it. And I think that was even just my first bit of telly. Russ Howard's Good News. It was horrible enough to just be like, right, I'm not interested. When I did my own series, I did Heavy Entertainment in 2015, maybe 16. I just came off Twitter altogether because I just couldn't be bothered to deal with all that. I regret that now. I wish I'd sort of like held my own and just sort of like promoted it every week. But I'm just not interested. And people used to say like, oh, you should go on Instagram, because you'll love Instagram. And then I went on Instagram and I did really like it. And every time you post anything, you get like 10 times more, 40 likes now. And it's like this amazing.
I only just got that. I was so focused on what you're saying. Like, he just told a joke. Got that.
It wasn't a great one. I've watered it down a bit for your audience.
I'll write that one down, actually.
but you get, do you know what I mean? All of a sudden, the instant gratification that you get from like posting anything on Instagram is great. But then it's also like you just end up like checking your phone all day, and you feel disgusted with yourself, and it's dirty.
And it goes on and on.
And then you have to go through phases like, I'm right, I've got to control my social media now. It's a business, right? So now I'm going to, like, as an exercise, I'm going to post a picture a day for a month and see how that works. And then if I've got more fun, and I did that last Edinburgh, I took a selfie a day for the entire Edinburgh Festival, and it started off just being like, I wonder how much weight I'll lose over the festival, and it ended up, I smiled in like the 4th one, and it got more likes than any others. So then I did a smile a day for the entire festival, and it was like, well, that's great. And I had like another fucking 5,000 followers, and I was just like, oh right, just by like posting a smile every day.
Wow.
And you're like, well, if I did that every day for the rest of my life, then I could have like, and then you just like, fuck this. I don't want to be on my phone. I don't want to be thinking about my phone.
No.
It's such a powerful tool, though. We've talked about this again, but it's such a powerful tool for marketing, though, isn't it?
The phone?
The social media, specifically social media.
Yeah, if you're good at it.
Yeah,
and if you're
good.
For an actor, performer, comedian, it's so big. It's such a huge audience online that you can hit very, very quickly.
I tell you what, and I always forget this, because I never, on Twitter, I never used to follow other comedians. And on Instagram, I didn't follow other comedians for a long time. Just because it was just like, I'm not interested. Like, what I wanted to do is stay in my lane, stay with my blinkers on, and then just sort of like promote stuff to my fans. And then as soon as you start following, you you must get this with other podcasts, right? So that you start following other people because you're a community.
Yeah.
And then you start seeing like who their guests are and like, you know, how many followers they've got, or how many years they've been going, and all the celebrations and the milestones that they're hitting, and they're growing and growing, and you're kind of like, and then rather than it being like your social media, it becomes sort of like a platform for you to involuntarily spy on your enemies, right, or your competitors, and then it becomes like, I want what they've got, and then it becomes like this other ugly thing, and I just think it's always just really important to remember that no matter who you follow, what your content is, what you're releasing, what you're posting, is for your followers. And it's like you can be kind of like bogged down in watching what other people's lifestyles are like, but the people that follow you are the people that are interested. And it's also about podcasts, because there's like this thing, it's just kind of every time a comedian starts another podcast, it's just like, oh, that's all the world needs, another podcast from another comedian. And you kind of like go, yeah, well, the world doesn't work like that now. The world is all sort of like tailor-made, so everyone can have specifics about what they specifically want. You're not creating, I'm not talking about you specifically, but like, me then, I'm not creating a podcast that is for everyone. I am creating a podcast which is for my followers, and I'm promoting stuff that is for my followers, and hopefully my followers will grow, but I'm not kind of like trying to compete with what everyone else is doing, I suppose, or I don't want to, but I just stay off of social media as much as possible, really.
I'm conscious of timing next. We're like 55 minutes in now, so have you got any?
I wanted to briefly touch on the pandemic.
Should we do up to 15:15?
Cool.
Yeah, if that's okay. I went to go and
see
see you about 7 months ago on your last tour to Aberystwyth in the Arts Centre. It's a fantastic show. And one of the main reasons I thought, oh my God, I'd love to get Nick Helm onto our podcast. And we only started it we were 2 months in, 3 months in. We thought, God, it'd be so good. And the thing that I found amazing in that show, not only was it really, really funny, obviously, but it was how like open you were about your mental health, and including sort of like trying to help people in the audience potentially if they were on any medication to sort of maybe change it if it wasn't the right medication for you because you had a personal experience with it. And I just wanted to know if you could sort of discuss that a little bit, maybe with the pandemic as well.
Right. Well, so the way I feel about, and I wouldn't say I was encouraging people to change their medication, but what I found was that the first drug that they put me on when I went to the doctors with depression was they put me on sertraline.
Okay.
And my experience with sertraline, and I talk about it on stage, and the thing is, I talk about stuff on stage, and then people come up to me afterwards and they say, I think you mean this, or you should try this, and I'm like, oh right, and then I'll go down like another rabbit hole and try and work out what's wrong with me. They put me on sertraline, and hang on, I want to say something else before I say this. Was that I've always talked about mental health on stage, and at first it was kind of like a joke, like because I was depressed, so I was writing material about what I was experiencing, and then I think when I did Live at the Apollo, I had but I had comments saying, "Oh, you're making fun of depression," and that really annoyed me, because it was like I'm not. I do talk about suicide and I do talk about depression, but I'm not making fun of it, I don't think. I'm talking about it. I'm not necessarily being all kind of like candy-coated about it and trying to be like, isn't everything fine and it'll all be all right? I'm not trying to say that. I can't say that. I'm just trying, and I'm not really trying to put any kind of like editorial spin on it. I'm literally just trying to say, in the old days when I was writing jokes, I was writing jokes. But it annoyed me when people kind of like either deliberately or just like misunderstood where I was coming from. I feel like whatever I do on stage is a performance, and who I am off stage is a different thing. I don't feel like I should have to explain that all the time. But like when I'm on stage, I'm I'm doing a thing. I'm clearly doing a thing. People have bought tickets, and there's lights pointing at the stage, and there's a microphone. It's not real life. No comedian is exactly like what they are on stage, off stage. But I feel like I do kind of. The overwhelming assumption is that off stage I'm a massive cunt, and it's just like, and people, you're in the lobby after a theatre, after you've done a gig in a theatre, and you're standing with your mum, and someone will come over and go, "Right, you cunt," and you'll be like, "This is my mother. This is my mother. Do you mind?" It's like,
don't say that word.
But I think mother. But what I'm trying to say is like true as well, and so what I did after that was, so when was that? That was about 2016, 2017. So I did 3 shows. I've done There's Nothing You Can Do to Me That I Haven't Already Done to Myself. That was my first of the 3. Then I did another show called Phoenix from the Flames, and then my third show was called What Have We Become, which was sort of about the pandemic, which is one you saw.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And they all dealt with mental health in a way.
Yeah.
I call it like my trilogy of misery, right? Where so I wrote 3 shows, and I'm kind of coming out of it now. I'm not going to do so much talking about depression on stage. It'll be part of my act, but I feel like after Live at the Apollo, I wanted to absolutely document how I feel about depression and what it is I'm trying to do about it.
Yeah.
And I would do all these gigs, and because of what I talk about, a lot of my fans would come up to me and they'd ask me for advice afterwards, and I'd be like, I'm not a GP, I can't give you advice.
Yeah.
And then you'd end up having like more and more people would come up to you and they'd be like asking for more and more advice, and I was like, well, I can't do this. It was, I would do a gig, and then afterwards there'd be a queue afterwards, and I'd be like talking to everyone, and I want to help people, and I want to do. And it wasn't like this is a massive inconvenience to me, but it was like I'm out of my depth here. I can't help. All I can do is go on stage and talk about what my experiences are, and if you can relate to that, that's brilliant. But I can't come off and I can't tell you what drugs to take, and I can't tell you, therapy is the answer. I can't do any of that. I can only tell you what worked for me.
Yeah.
And so then I was just like, I'm going to start talking about it on stage and address all of that. And get that done. And I did 1 show, and then it was 2 shows, and then and I didn't realise the second show was still about it, and then the third show was just like, hang on, these 3 shows really hang together. I think with sertraline, I was so depressed, I didn't know what to do, and then they put me on sertraline, and I was on it for 5 months, and I was suicidal. I was so depressed. I was like, I would say, I think I hit rock bottom during the pandemic, but before the pandemic, I felt like that was rock bottom. And when I was on sertraline, I would. It's so difficult to even get washed and to brush your teeth and to get dressed and to do anything. Do you know what I mean? Mm. And so to book a doctor's appointment to say these drugs that I'm on, I don't think are working. And you're scared as well because you think if I just come off them, then what if that makes it worse? No? Yeah. And so I'd be talking to the doctor like every couple of weeks, and I'd be like, I can't stress this out. I'm suicidal. Right? I can't stop thinking, or they're intrusive thoughts. Every 5 seconds, I'd be having a voice in my head tell me to kill myself. And I was just like, but like I was exhausted, like absolutely, like, and the doctor would always say, just give it another 2 weeks, and just give it another 2 weeks. And you'd be like, I don't know, do you know what I mean? I don't know. I'd never had like any intentions, but the thought was just non-stop, and it was just like, I don't know what to do. So eventually I was just like, fuck this. So I stopped taking, which is bad. But you shouldn't do that. You should talk to your GP and wean yourself off them. But I just stopped taking sertraline, and then I didn't take any antidepressants. And I felt the immediate reaction after I stopped taking sertraline was that I felt incredible. I felt incredible for about 4 or 5 months. I think I'd stopped taking it in August, and it took me all the way up to Christmas, and then I started feeling shit again. And then, but maybe that's a winter thing.
Maybe.
And then in the new year, I ended up going on fluoxetine, which didn't do much, but I couldn't fuck. I could fuck. I couldn't come. I could fuck for hours.
But that's a side effect. Is that actually a side effect?
Is that or is it just with you?
Well, maybe I just got real good at it.
Keep the wolf from the door.
I doubt that happened. It was a side effect of the drugs. I'd say it on stage, and there's some people. What I do on stage is I just go, who's on antidepressants, and I get everyone to and if they want to, they can shout out, and then I talk about the antidepressants that I was on, and then so fluoxetine didn't do much. It didn't make me feel much different, and then I was eventually on mirtazapine, and mirtazapine got me to a point during lockdown. I mean, I feel like a lot of the stuff that I've been kind of putting off, like terrible experiences, being bullied at school, just stuff that goes right the way back, where you just feel like it's got to be all unrelated, right? Because it can't just be like a chain of stuff that's right from my formative years up to now. You just think it can't be that obvious, can it? That something has happened and I've never sort of fully recovered from it. I know we all have our experiences. I'm just talking about mine.
Yeah.
I'm not saying mine are any more valid than anyone else's.
No, I know.
But mine are just that, I had a terrible time at school. And there's other stuff that I don't want to talk about. But and then it's like a snowball where it sort of starts accumulating more and more stuff. And because of the way you have been treated, you behave differently and you treat other people, and then you realize that there are all of these kind of personality traits that you've developed that aren't really you, but are things that you've kind of picked up from what you've learned, or as a defense mechanism, and the way you're kind of trying to protect yourself from the world because you feel like you've always been rejected by people. Do you know what I mean? And so it's kind of there are all these things. And when it got to the pandemic, I kind of I feel like I was drinking so much, and I wasn't looking after myself, and I really do feel like I hit absolutely rock bottom. I gave up drinking, and I didn't want to give up drinking. I don't feel like, and this probably sounds more alcoholic than anything else, I don't feel like I was an alcoholic, but I feel like I do have an addictive personality, and it just depends where I put that addiction, Can it be in something that is good for me, or can it be something that's destructive? And with alcohol, I kind of gave up drinking, and it was the one thing I didn't want to do because I love drinking. I grew up in pubs. I worked in pubs. I used to go to the pub with a pint and write a song or write a poem or something. I used to fucking I loved it, and I love the world of drinking, and I'm not saying that I'll never drink again, but it was the one thing I didn't want to do. It was just I've been depressed for 39 years back then, and I don't want to give up drinking because I love it so much. But I've tried everything else. I've tried exercise, I've tried diet, I've tried pills, I've tried therapy, I've tried talking to people, I've tried everything. But the one thing I haven't tried is to stop drinking. And alcohol's a depressant. So I gave up drinking, and
has it helped, Nick?
No. I wouldn't say it's helped. But what I do feel is that I'm proud of myself for having the willpower to do it.
Definitely. Okay.
And
you should be proud of the awareness as well. So, awareness in your own personality to go, right, I've got an addictive personality, I better not, maybe I shouldn't channel it this way.
Yeah, I think so. I'm sort of like an all or nothing sort of person, and so when I was in during the pandemic, I ended up going on mirtazapine, and mirtazapine is the drug that kind of, I guess, worked the best. I'm not on it anymore, but it gave me what I needed to crawl out of this pit that I was in, and I mean, even like last year, what year are we in now? 2023, 2021. I couldn't look after myself, and I hadn't washed in months, and it was like this real thing where I just couldn't do it, and I didn't want to do stand up anymore. I found it so stressful. It was so overwhelming. How do you learn it all? It was before the pandemic. I just was so stressed about it. Every single gig I found stressful, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And then after the gig, after the pandemic, 2021 onwards, I had to reteach myself how to do stand up, and I had to teach myself how to. I got to a point where I wasn't doing as much telly, and I was just like, right, if this is your job, if you're a stand-up comedian, you better start enjoying it. and I had to just go back to basics and throw out all my material, and then just go. My big problem before the pandemic was remembering everything, because I had like 20 different elements to everything that I was doing. I was just like, I'm going to go on, and I don't want to have to remember anything, and I want to not think about what I'm going to do until I hear my name, and then I'll go up on stage and then I'll do it. And that was my criteria for doing it.
Wow.
And I ended up with like 3 routines, which was one about Pepsi Max Cherry, one about Prince Andrew, and
what's he done wrong?
I don't,
How long ago?
and
Sorry,
don't Google him. Don't Google him. And there was one about Sainsbury's, and they all, or maybe it was Boris Johnson, and they all kind of like. They all go, no, it was about how much I loved him. And, don't get me wrong, he's a great guy. But it was just literally, I don't want to remember it. I don't want anything to remember. And it was just like, if I could remember Pepsi Max Cherry, Sainsbury's and Prince Andrew, then, or Hello Fresh was another one. But I had these like huge routines, and I could go on and I could do 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour. If I just remembered Pepsi Max Cherry,
Wow.
I could do like an hour, which was just me sort of like going through all of like these processes of what I think and what I think about Pepsi Max Cherry, and it would be like, I'd visually remember how I got into Sainsbury's and how they change all the prices every day and what Sainsbury's was like after the pandemic, and I'd have all of that, these routines that were all directly linked to each other, but really it was just stream of consciousness, and I was just like, right, and then I started making money off of doing stand-up again,
Did it bring the love back?
I love it. I love it more than I've ever loved it.
Amazing.
It's my absolute.
That's awesome.
It's my favourite thing. It's my absolute favourite thing in the world. That tour that you saw me do.
Yep.
I mean, I loved that. Every time I do a show, I feel like, this is my new favourite show that I've done.
Yeah.
I really loved that show. There weren't any songs in it because I didn't want to have to learn any lyrics.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to spend the whole hour I was on stage going, I've got a song coming up. What are the words?
Yeah.
I just wanted to just not have to worry about any of that. And I did it. And I've sort of, reignited my love of what I'm doing and what I've done. I'm very grateful for, this year is the 10th anniversary of my album. I wrote an album 10 years ago, more than one album, but that was my first album. And I'm so grateful that I wrote that album 10 years ago. And I've been listening back to it this year going, it's incredible, with fresh ears, just like, not like aren't I brilliant, but like that album's great, and I did that. Like I was lucky. I'm lucky enough to have,
nice.
Done that. And so, there's a new love and passion for what I'm doing. But I've had to sort of work through a lot of awful things, and I feel like I'm coming out of this cloud that I've been under.
I was going to ask, how are you now?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. Like, it's not all brilliant, but I feel like things have calmed down so much. Every day is sort of its own adventure, but what you have to do is you have to remember back to, like, even the beginning of the year was terrible, and even 4 months ago was terrible. The fact that I'm still here, the fact that I'm still doing everything. I've been to some absolutely horrific, dark places in my head, and physically I've changed, and I'm just trying to sort of, with what I do on stage, I don't ever want to go on stage and tell people what they should do and what they shouldn't do, and this is what I did and I'm right, and I don't ever want to use stand-up as a soapbox. And you can like me and you can not like me, but I feel that if I go on stage and I talk about antidepressants without any editorial comment on it, the fact that I'm talking about it hopefully opens up the ability for people on the journey home to go, there you go, I felt like that, or maybe I should get some pills. And I get messages from people all the time saying that I help them work out what was wrong with them, or I help them start that journey of going to a GP or talking to their mum or their family about it. And, fantastic. And that I feel like a sense of I don't know if it's pride, but I feel like I feel like I've done something good.
I just want to say thank you for saying all that, Nick, because it's I think it just proves the point as well that it can hit anyone at any time as well, like mental health, depression, and thank you for sharing your story with us. I really appreciate that, and we all do.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Always.
Quick fires.
If you
go for it.
Yeah, favourite chocolate bar.
My favourite chocolate bar. Oh, fuck! This is a quick fire.
Yes.
Don't have to be that quick fire, but yeah.
Okay, right. Okay. So my favourite. Do you know what? At the moment, I really love a orange slab of Tony's chocolate.
Tone. Is that the salted caramel
Yeah,
one? You know what?
caramel.
Weirdly, I was telling these guys about that about a week ago.
Oh yeah.
He thinks there's actual crack.
I thought it was cracking it.
Oh yeah, right.
Or meth. I don't know.
Yeah, I
Either or.
think Tony's chocolate is my dad's called Tony and he loves chocolate, so I buy him. That's Christmas sort, isn't it?
Stocking.
I love that fucking chocolate.
Yeah, it's great. It's really great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really
that-
I'm going to try it. I need to try it.
Or,
so good.
or a Toblerone,
Oh, there's one in my fridge.
Toby.
or a Kinder Bueno. I mean, fuck off. I mean, I live in London and we've got an off license that's open all night.
Yeah, it's always
We
there.
don't get those yet.
So, yeah, I know.
I just got electricity.
That's why you're all in such good shape. You're all in good shape in Wales because you can't. Nowhere's fucking open. Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna run 10 miles for that Tony chocolate.
Yeah, I can eat chocolate at 4 a.m. Yeah, right. Okay.
Favorite film, Nick?
My favourite film, Army of Darkness.
Oh, wow.
Army of
Evil Dead.
Darkness.
Evil Dead 3, yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Amazing.
That's
The medieval Dead.
Yeah, that's the one where he's chainsaw arm or shotgun arm, or he's got
Well,
shotgun and a chainsaw.
if you remember, he
I don't remember at all.
he gets the chainsaw hand in Evil Dead 2, but he does use it a lot in Evil Dead 3, Army of Darkness.
Wow,
It was
cool.
my favourite film when I was growing up, and I just haven't got... Oh, the best film ever made is Jaws.
Wow.
Well,
We got it.
I would say the greatest
It is.
movie ever made is Jaws. My favourite film is Army of Darkness, and my other favourite film would be something like Royal Tenenbaums, more than any of his other films, and maybe the best, the purest cinematic experience is something like Casablanca.
Oh, I've never seen that.
No.
Casablanca is one of them films, right? I hadn't seen it until quite recently, within maybe like the last 5 years. Casablanca is one of them films when you watch it, you go, you feel like you've seen it, right? Your whole life. Bugs Bunny was doing Casablanca, and like it's referenced in everything. They referenced it in Red Dwarf. They referenced it in absolutely everything. Casablanca is when you watch it, you go, oh, I get it, because it is just almost the greatest film ever made. It's so good, and and then at the end they round up the usual suspects, and you go, that's where the usual suspects came from. Everything is from Casablanca, and you watch it and you go, oh right, but it's like a really kind of energetic, like it doesn't feel like it's 80 years old. It feels like very energetic and modern.
Nice.
It's brilliant.
I'll watch that.
It's really good. If you like Jaws, then I can't see why you wouldn't like Casablanca.
I'll watch
Casablanca's
that.
brilliant. It's so good. Yeah, it's
I'll
real
watch
good.
that, Definitely.
And they all thought it was shit when they were making it. Like they were all embarrassed about
Really?
it.
What?
Humphrey Bogart had a really jealous wife, and so him and Ingrid Bergman, they only met up once or maybe twice outside of filming.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And one of them was a lunch that they had right before they started filming. It was Humphrey Bogart, his wife, and Ingrid Bergman, and they all sat around the table and they discussed how could they get out of making Casablanca, because it was they were just like, this is the most embarrassing, cliche-ridden piece of shit. It's going to ruin our names by being attached to it. And then they made it, and then you look at it now, and it's just like all of those cliches that are in the film make it into almost like the ultimate movie. It's brilliant. It's a great film.
Definitely.
I love knowing that stuff about
This quick fire round is great, isn't it?
Sorry. Last one then. Favorite band or music?
My favourite band, Alice Cooper is my favourite.
Nice.
I'd do anything for Alice Cooper, but I love Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper.
Poison.
Yeah, Poison. It's a classic.
Poison is classic.
House of Fire.
House of Fire.
House of Fire is one of my favourite ones.
Off
Off
the Trash album.
Yeah, Trash.
Yeah.
My dad had Trash, and I listened to that a lot when I was a
Yeah,
kid.
my sister had Trash, and that's what got me into it, really.
House of Fire, very catchy.
House of Fire and Bed of Nails.
Yeah, that whole album is very, very good.
Every song is a fuck song. It's just like he's like a born again Christian now. He doesn't do any of the songs off Trash. I think he did Bed of Nails on the last tour, and it was like, whoa, it's a bit weird. I'm gonna drive you like a hammer on a bed of nails. And this is like, you're 75. It's really, I love him.
Yeah,
cool. Fantastic.
Thank you so much for coming on, and it was incredible.
No, thanks for having me.
So much.
And all the best for your show tonight.
Oh, he's going to be dog shit now, isn't it?
No.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, great.
Thanks Nick.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Great.